starting our little Colorado ghost town adventure in a place that's a little bit of a mystery. It's called Settlement, which is a strange name for a town. And when you try to look up stuff online, you put Settlement, Colorado, and you just don't find anything because it refers to just other things that aren't this specific town, just other settlements or whatever. So I started this morning. I went to the Old Town Museum in Burlington, which is not too far from here, and it's kind of the history of the county. And they didn't know much about it either, except for there are a couple churches that are not too far from here, and this whole area for miles is referred to as settlement, that originally some white Russians, not the drink, the people, came here and created a settlement, and that's why they named it Settlement. It was the White Russian Settlement. And at the dot on the map, there is this, what looks to be an old school. It says 1953 on the front of the building, and that probably is consistent with what it looks like in terms of how old it is. But the people at the museum didn't know anything about this. They knew a little bit about the churches. The churches are, before we talk about the school here, the churches are pretty cool. There's I think a Lutheran church, which is like the first Lutheran church in Colorado. Has, it's a beautiful structure built in the 1920s and obviously kind of refurbished. And then there's the Hope Church, and that was another, it looked more modern, but it also had dates from like 1911 on the side, so probably rebuilt or redone, and had a cemetery there as well. And the oldest headstone way back in the corner said 1911, so makes consistent with, the town or whatever it was of Settlement, Colorado. This school, I guess it's a school, who knows what it was. If anybody knows, please put it in the comments. That would be very helpful. But inside, it kind of looks like a school. There's a chalkboard and old chairs, but who knows what it's being used for now. But beautiful area, and really glad I came out here to check out Settlement. Guarded by a tumbleweed. That's kind of creepy. Getting a little windy out, so I'm going to do this next one from inside my vehicle. We've dropped down to US Route 40, which is, the east-west, two-lane road that is probably almost 100 years old at this point, and very important to the middle part of America, getting east and west. And we're here at Firstview. It's a pretty interesting spot. There's not much here left, but there are some remnants. There's obviously was a railroad stop, and there's a couple old buildings to explore around and check out. And it was called Firstview because as people were heading west, it was said this was the first view of Pikes Peak. And Pikes Peak is 135 miles away. And it's hard to see it right now. It's a little hazy in that direction, but obviously that's probably, was accurate. And it had a post office for almost 50 years. And so that's a pretty significant community to have it for that long. And so, there's not much left, like I was saying. There may be some sort of a project going on over, I see some tractors and things like that, but mostly it's just the remnants of the railroad. And obviously this was a railroad stop, and that's why it was started here. And just to the east of here, just a couple miles, was a nice monument about the Smoky Hill Road, and so that Smoky Hill Trail, I should say. And a lot of information. Cheyenne Wells is the closest town to here, and so anybody who lived here, obviously when the post office closed, that's where things got shifted. So yeah, pretty cool little historic area. Welcome to Main Street, Wild Horse, Colorado. And spoiler alert, this is probably one of my favorite ghost towns I've ever visited. It has a little bit of everything. But before we get to that, a little bit about the history. So this is actually started as a cavalry outpost in 1869. We're right on US 40 still. And but it was a cavalry outpost. And then soon after that, it's loud. Soon after that, the railroad came through, so that was convenient for the location, and so it started to grow. And by the early 1900s, it was a pretty decent sized town, I guess you would call it. Yeah, pretty decent sized town, lots of businesses. And then 1917, they had a big fire that most of the town went up in flames. So they tried to rebuild, and they just never, it was much smaller after they rebuilt it. Then the Depression hit, and that was it dwindled from there. They still have a post office here. So there are some people that, you can see a few houses in the town, but they must, this must serve the rural area, the farms with the post office here, because there aren't that many people that live in Wild Horse. It's pretty much a ghost town. So yeah, it's got an amazing amount of old buildings on not only in the main street, but some other places. There's an old school, there's a church, and it's a great, if you like ghost towns, you definitely want to come to Wild Horse, Colorado. One fun fact is that there was a Netflix comedy series called Space Force, and the setting, or I guess the home of the US Space Force, was Wild Horse, Colorado. Now, they didn't actually film anything here, but the fact that they chose this place as the home of the US Space Force is pretty hilarious, and I think pretty awesome. I saw there was a truck at the post office, so I thought I'd go over and just see if, get any more information from someone there. And the post mistress was in, and she said that they have about 30 addresses that they, service here. So kind of interesting. I was, obviously there's not 30 homes here in Wild Horse, but they, she said basically, yeah, you go out to the farmers in this area. So about 30 is the mail route. And that the school is also on it's a National Historic Site now, so that they can keep it up. It looks really nice, the school. And the brick building on Main Street was like a dance hall back in the day, and I guess there were some wild times in Wild Horse, Colorado. I wasn't going to stop in Aroya. I did see it on the map, but I didn't know anything about it and just hadn't planned on going there. And as I was driving past where it was, I saw an old abandoned building and thought, well, I'll go over and check it out. And sure enough, man, what a fantastic place. I'm so glad I stopped, because when I pulled up to where the town was, there's a whole display and a history of the town. And man, that's so awesome to find in a place that's basically abandoned. And so I'll just read kind of parts of what that is to tell you the history of the town, because I had no idea about it when I rolled in. Joseph O. Dostal, a
veteran of the Civil War, came to Colorado in 1866 to run a meat market in the mountains and ended up establishing the J.O.D. Ranch. When Cheyenne County was formed in 1889, Dostal was the new county's largest property taxpayer. The JOD headquarters was located near the new Kansas Pacific Railroad, which built a watering stop there named Aroya because of the large gulch nearby. Aroya was originally 3 miles west of the present site here. Old Aroya originated as a railroad camp for the Kansas Pacific track layers in 1870, ultimately was moved to the east where there was a better supply of water. A man named George Slater moved a building into Aroya around 1907 and operated the first store. Not too long after that, the homestead boom had peaked, and Aroya had nearly any kind of business one could ask for except for a saloon. The citizens of Aroya went to nearby Wild Horse, where there were more than enough saloons to meet the demand. A small school west of town was replaced after about 10 years by a larger school closer to the town, and that school still remains. Over the years, since the state highway bypassed the town, businesses closed, the buildings were torn down, and the people moved away.
The school is awesome, the town is awesome, and I saw on Google Maps there's a cemetery out there, but there's no road to get there. So flew the drone over and found it. Cool little, cemetery out in the middle of nowhere. It would have been nice to go up to it, but at least was able to find it on the drone. The sun has come out and it's super windy. So I'm gonna stay in the car. I'd love to go outside and talk about this interesting town, but I'll stay in here just so the wind isn't so bad on the mic. It's pretty crazy windy right now. We are in Punkin Center, and what a fun name. This is an interesting, this one's interesting. We're at a crossroads here. I think it's 94 and 71. And so someone in the 1920s had the idea, let's put a, convenience store here, a coffee shop, something for travelers at the intersection. Made a lot of sense, and it was successful. And as you look at it today, I'm gonna go back to kind of the history of it. You look at it today, there are still people that live here. There's some kind of mobile homes. There's a house that has a cool little archway in front of it. It looks like maybe a highway maintenance building or two. So it has relevance still, even today, even though it's a ghost town. And so that's cool that there's something here. But the story of Punkin Center is pretty interesting and could be considered a ghost town in multiple ways. Like I said earlier, guy created a business here, and he was known for carrying firearm with him, just in case. You never know in the 1920s who would stop by. And apparently some guys tried to stop by and rob the place, and there was a shootout here, and neither one of them were killed, but both had been wounded, and the store owner was able to drag him to like a house and call the police, and they were able to get the thief. And then years later, there were some youngsters that came by to get gas, and they tried to rob the place too. And unfortunately, in that circumstance, the owner was shot and killed. So then years later, someone else bought the place, and they were driving back from Denver, Colorado Springs, or something like that, and they see the place is on fire, and the gas station, convenience store, everything burns to the ground. And the guy who was the owner thought he saw someone coming from the ashes, and maybe this was the ghost of the original owner who had been killed there. So anyways, there's a good ghost story for you to end our visit around eastern Colorado. Some really interesting places. Most people think of ghost towns in Colorado, they think of like mining ghost towns, and there's certainly lots of those, hundreds and hundreds of those. But this was pretty cool. These felt similar to maybe ones you'd find in Kansas or Oklahoma. So I really enjoyed this tour of some eastern Colorado ghost towns. pretty pretty quiet part of US 50. US 40. Not US 50, US 40. The Lutheran Church in Settlement has a death go round. It has aged. Let's see how it spins. Has a little squeak, but it spins pretty good. Probably in a little oil, and that would get an excellent rating. We're gonna give it an 8 out of 10.